Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible life of Trevor Noah, a man whose very existence was literally a crime. We're going to trace his journey from the shadows of apartheid to the brightest global stages and uncover the blueprint he built, not just for success, but for real, honest-to-God, inner freedom. And this quote right here, this is the key to everything. It's the lens he was forced to look through, and it's the foundation of his entire story. So let's unpack that. Let's dive right in. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll move through 4 chapters of his life. We'll start with the trauma that shaped him, then get into the pressures of fame, explore his journey into understanding his own mind, and finally land on his pretty radical redefinition of what a successful life even means. First up, a crime, a calling. We're going to explore how the insane, high-stakes world of his childhood didn't just break him. It actually forged the very tools he would later use to conquer comedy and commentary. He turned survival into a superpower. I mean, you look at this timeline, and his career path was just meteoric, right? But to really understand the rocket fuel for that climb, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, to a world that was unsafe not just systematically, but inside his own home, too. Now, this slide is crucial because it breaks down the 2 battlefronts that basically hardwired his brain for constant alert. On one side, you've got the state itself, where just being seen in public with his parents could get them all thrown in jail. And on the other, the danger inside his own home, where he learned to predict his stepfather's mood just by the sound of his footsteps on the driveway. His brain became this incredibly sophisticated radar for danger. And he brilliantly frames this whole upbringing not as some tragedy, but with this sponge cake analogy. He sees those early years as providing this sturdy, if, unconventional base. The point wasn't that he was a victim, it was that he had these unique ingredients baked right in that allowed him to absorb all the complex lessons the world was going to throw at him later. So you'd think, okay, he's made it. He escaped all that. But the very resilience forged in those fires was about to be tested in a totally different way. He found himself in a new kind of trap, a gilded cage of fame, built from the crushing weight of information and the world's expectations. And wow, this chart just lays bare the invisible price tag of his dream job. His life became a nonstop engine for consuming global chaos, all driven by a work ethic that was forged back when he had nothing. And just look at that tiny little sliver left over for actual personal joy. He was becoming a voice for millions while slowly but surely losing his own. This quote right here, this captures his breaking point. He had this huge realization that being constantly informed is kind of a modern illusion. It wasn't making him wiser, it was just feeding his anxiety and pushing him into the state of permanent burnout. And he knew this just wasn't sustainable. He had to look inward. And that moment, that burnout, was the real catalyst for a profound journey inward, which brings us to our 3rd section, rewiring a neurodiverse mind. This pushed him to stop trying to manage the world outside and instead to become the architect of his world inside, to finally understand his own unique mental operating system. This was a total game changer for him. He learned that those deep funks of depression he'd get into, they weren't a moral failure. They were a mechanical, physiological response tied directly to his ADHD. See, his brain was either getting totally overwhelmed with noise or it was starving for stimulation, and so it would just shut down. This flipped the whole script from what's wrong with me to, okay, what does my brain actually need? So what did he do about it? Well, he developed this incredibly simple but powerful checklist. Before a negative emotional spiral could really grab hold, he would just stop and ask himself these 3 basic questions. It was his way of treating his mental health like a biological reality, giving his high-performance brain the right fuel before it could stall out. He also perfected this other amazing mental tool, which he calls the observer technique. It's a way to consciously take a step back from that reactive, hyper-vigilant survival brain that was wired into him as a kid. So, for example, instead of thinking, I am so anxious, he would literally say to himself, Trevor is feeling anxious right now. By talking to himself as a third party, he could see the storm of anxious thoughts without letting them steer the ship. And all of this deep internal work, it all led him to his final and maybe his most profound destination, the freedom of enough. It's a complete blueprint for living that redefines not just success, but our whole relationship with trauma and what we're really doing here. This deep work forced him to confront a really common, and he argues, a pretty toxic idea about suffering. especially after his mother miraculously survived being shot by his stepfather. Is pain really something we should be grateful for? And his answer is a hard, unequivocal no. He completely rejects the whole idea of romanticizing pain. As he puts it, you can learn from surviving a storm, for sure, but that doesn't mean you should ever wish for the storm to have happened. We don't need to be broken in order to become strong. This philosophy directly led him to escape what he calls the trap of more. He recognized that the scarcity mindset from his youth was still driving him, even when he was living a life of total abundance. So he made a choice. He consciously stepped off that professional treadmill to reclaim his most valuable, non-renewable asset, his time. And in the end, this is his powerful message for all of us. His journey from being born a crime to becoming a global icon, and finally, a free individual, that's not just his story. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that we are all holding the pen. So the real question he leaves us with is this: what story are you writing for yourself?